it might be overwhelming for some people, or it might be boring for others if you had know a lot of this. So I'm going to try to stay high level, but give some details that I feel are important. But the best thing for you to do is, pick out the parts that impact you, but don't miss the overall message of how God created creation and His plan for our lives. So these are my goals today: is that you'll see God's great power and majesty, that it'll increase our faith in God, and stand in awe of His creation. I know for me, learning about this has deepened my faith in God. Before I dug into this, it wasn't often, but on occasion, there'd be a little glimpse of question like, is God real? But I mean, these are super fleeting. It's probably like a second, and I know He's real, and then I push it out of my mind. But just hearing this stuff, I don't know, it leaves me convinced that God designed the universe, and it's quite amazing. And that we can see God's ultimate love for us and His desire for us to know Him, and to respond to that love for us and seek Him and follow Him in a deeper way. So we're going to start with Psalm 19. You don't have to turn there, you can. But I have everything just kind of laid out for you to sit back and enjoy.
Wow. Thank you for that.
So, but Psalm 19, yeah, I guess you can check it, make sure it's accurate. I didn't modify. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna start the timer. It's gonna be about 30 minutes or less. In verse 1, it says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The skies display His craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make Him known. They speak without a word or sound or word. Their voice is never heard. Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun." I love that passage. David being a shepherd, probably sleeping outside oftentimes, gazing at the stars. So he saw how God proclaims, or how the stars in the heavens proclaim the glory of God. So we're going to look at some of that today. In the Voyager spacecraft was sent out, and here's a video as it is it moving? Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just so tiny. So before the Voyager left our solar system, it turned around and took a picture of the Earth, and there's a ray of light with the sun, and it's this tiny little pale blue dot. And when you look at that in the vast universe, you got to ask, are we special somehow?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, we're so tiny, and I mean, we're among hundreds of billions of planets. I mean, there's so many stars, and those stars could have planets. So are we different in any way? Are we privileged? Are we a privileged planet? So the first point is that we are privileged. There's a documentary you can find on YouTube called "The Privileged Planet" that dives into some of this in a deeper way. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But we're going to look at the factors needed to have complex life on Earth, and the factors needed to make scientific discovery, and how God designed it that way. So the fourth verse of Psalm 19 that we just read, it says, "Yet their message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun." So we're going to start there. So the sun. In order for us to survive, we have to have a sun, but not just any star. It has to be a certain type of star. It's called a spectral type G2 main sequence star. So it's a certain size, a certain temperature and brightness. And there is, and we have to live in the right distance from that star.
Sure.
And there's something called the Goldilocks zone. So it's this habitable zone around the sun where the temperature is just right. So it's Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold. If we were just 5% closer, then it would be too hot, 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and we'd be like Venus, where you couldn't live on it. It's just super hot. Now, on the contrary, if we were 20% further away, then carbon dioxide clouds would form in the upper atmosphere, and we'd have the cycles of ice and cold that makes Mars uninhabitable. So we have to have liquid water to have complex life, and so the distance from the sun is important. If it's too hot, it will evaporate, and too cold, it would be ice. We have to have an oxygen-rich atmosphere. So our oxygen is made of oxygen and nitrogen, and it just measures less than 1% of the Earth's diameter. So it's kind of like this. It's as thin as the skin of an apple. You think of it that way. It's this tiny atmosphere. And it's made of 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 1% carbon dioxide. But that is a correct combination of gases needed to have liquid water and to have protection from the sun's radiation. Like, we have to live on a terrestrial planet, and that's a compact rocky surface. So the Earth's crust is really thin, that allows, there's a dozen plates that are in constant motion. So there's plate tectonics happening, but that's important to basically regulate the temperature of the Earth. So it's shifting, and it kind of regulates the temperature. And there's, in the core, there's liquid iron that's moving, so it makes a magnetic field around the Earth, which protects us from the sun's solar winds. Otherwise, it would destroy life. Like, I never knew, the magnetic field, we know about it, compasses work, but we never knew, we need that for our survival. We also have a relatively large moon for the size of our Earth. It's about 1/4 the size of Earth, but that large moon helps us stabilize the Earth while it's spinning on its axis. It's at a constant 23.5 degree tilt. Now that's important because it gives us the seasons, and it moderates the temperature on the surface of the Earth. So, there's global warming, but it would be worse if we didn't have that tilt. Albert Einstein said that the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. That's pretty amazing. God could have made life, but he didn't have to let us understand the universe. And it's just amazing how much we know about the universe and how it works, and the math and the science involved. Yeah, he didn't have to let us do that, but he did. One of the biggest amazing things is that we can have a total solar eclipse. So remember I talked about the right size sun and the right size moon? Well, the sun is 400 times bigger than the moon, but it's also 400 times further away. So in the sky, it takes up about a 1/2 degree of space in the sky, and it has to match up in order for us to have a total solar eclipse. What are the chances of that? That was by design. Now, to be able, or the total solar eclipse allows us to observe the sun's chromosphere, and that if we look at it through a spectrum or a prism, we can see what's called the flash spectrum. And that's important because it tells us what the sun is made up of and the gases that make it up. There's helium, and I don't even know what those symbols mean. But anyways, okay, there you go. Yeah. But it gives us a lot of information.
Is that calcium?
I have no idea. I have no idea. But it lets us understand how the sun produces energy and about its atmosphere. God didn't have to do that, but he did. Okay, so there's factors needed for complex life or intelligent life to be formed. There's factors needed to make scientific discovery, But what if the same factors that allow complex life are also the same factors that allow for scientific discovery? Like the right size moon, the right size sun, the right distance away, all these things. We talked about the Goldilocks zone in the solar system. We have to have the right location in the Milky Way galaxy. So we know that the Milky Way is a spiral disk galaxy. If we were located near the center, then it would be too dangerous. There'd be exploding novas all the time. The gravity pull would be too strong. And in the middle, there's like a massive black hole that sucks up stars, and it'd be far too dangerous for us to survive. There's black hole sucking up a star there. So we don't want to do that. But conversely, if we were too far away on the outer edge, then there's not enough gravity to have the abundance of magnesium, silicon, oxygen, iron that the Earth is made up of. So there's this galactic habitable zone that our solar system resides in. We're also not located in one of the arms of the Milky Way, because inside there'd be exploding novas in there as well, but also it'd be really dusty. Like we couldn't see much beyond the Earth. That little bright spot is where we are located, our solar system. Now we're in between two spiral arms, and we're there because we can. There's not a lot of dust there, so we can see beyond our galaxy to other galaxies, which is amazing. And we also can observe the spiral arm. Has anyone seen the Milky Way at night? Like the arm, one of the arms? It looks like that. You have to get away from the city to see it. It's quite beautiful. But because of that, it also helps us understand that we live in a spiral disk galaxy. It's amazing. And there's other factors that allow life. We have to have large planets like Jupiter and Saturn to act like bodyguards, because if there's a comet zipping towards us or meteors, it sucks it up. There's other like little things that just are mind-blowing. The strength of gravity has to be the right strength. If it was too strong, we'd be crushed. You couldn't have more than like the size of a pea to live. The speed of light has to be the right speed. The weight of neutrons, protons, electrons have to be the right weight. And the nuclear force that holds those atoms together has to be the right force. It's just quite mind-blowing. But now that we have complex life and we can make scientific discovery, let's talk about one of those special discoveries, and that's the Star of Bethlehem. But here is a scripture in Romans 1:20. The Bible says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse to believe in him." On the fourth day of creation, in Genesis 1, it talks about the purpose of the stars. So Genesis 1:14 and 16 says, "And God said, let there be lights in the vault of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs and mark sacred times and days and years. God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made the stars." So he made them to mark sacred times and serve as signs and mark days and years. So we're going to look at some of that. I messed up earlier. I said astrologist, so astronomy is not the same as astrology. God doesn't want like astrology where the signs, dictate our lives. But no, astronomy is very much okay. and encouraged because we can see God's power. And, Job looked at some of that, or some of this. So, Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible. In Job 9:9, Job said he made all the stars, the Bear and Orion, the Pleiades, and the constellations of the southern sky. So, yeah, he was an astronomer as well. It's interesting that when God responded to Job in chapter 38, he used the same three constellations that Job is familiar with. God said, "Can you direct the movement of the stars, binding the clusters of the Pleiades or loosen the cords of Orion? Can you direct the constellations through the seasons or guide the bear with her cubs across the heavens?" Yeah. So, do you know the laws of the universe? Can you use them to regulate the earth, regulate the temperature of the earth? It's like, yeah, God did that. So, this is what. Okay, so we're going to look at the Star of Bethlehem. You can also find this on YouTube. This is the cover, image. This guy named Rick Larson, there's the birth of, talking about the birth of Christ. Rick Larson made this movie, and, a lot of this is his work and his findings. If the topic interests you, I encourage you to watch it and, tell me what you think. So, but some of the science behind this is Johannes Kepler in the 1600s. He discovered the math that you can use to calculate the stars and the planets and their movements. And I took an astronomy class in college, and so it was like September, the first day of class, and we learned about this math. And the professor made us predict where the moon would be on December 9th or some early December. And it was so you got north, south, it was like a certain degree from that. And then you got 0 degrees, 90 degrees straight up. And it was like, I could calculate what degree in the sky it would be at a certain time of the day, and, what phase of the moon it would be. So it was really accurate, and I was just like, wow, it was amazing. But he made this math, so then it makes but this math can be put into software. Wow. And one of them is called Starry Night, which I bought that. I'm trying to figure out how it works. It's kind of advanced. But if you put it in a software, you can kind of rewind all of the movements, and you can pick any date in the past or any date in the future, and it will tell you what the sky will look like on that day. Kepler, when he discovered this, one of the first things he did was try to look for the Star of Bethlehem, but he was looking at the wrong years for some kind of misinformation on the death of Herod. But now there's new information. In 1996, there was some discoveries that I won't go into too deep. But if you look in 2 and 3 BC, because Kepler is looking in 5 and 6 BC, but if you look in 2 and 3 BC, that's what we're going to look at now. It's pretty amazing. But it makes the universe like this giant clock, because it's very precise, and you can predict what will happen, and you can look back and see what happened. So in Matthew 2, we're going to look at some clues about the star. Matthew 2 in verse 1 says, "After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, 'Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him.'" In some translations it says we saw the star in the east, but the word used is actually rising in the east. So there's 4 clues kind of right here about the star. It's something that indicates a birth. It's something that refers to the Jewish nation. Something that talks about kingship, and it's rising in the east. And that's important because not all stars rise, like pulsars don't, shooting stars don't, But yeah, we'll look at that. Here's little picture of Jupiter, and there's a red line that kind of shows you what it is. But Jupiter, if you zoom in close, so from the naked eye, you can't tell that there's actually two stars there. But there's a star called Regulus, and it was really close to Jupiter, so it made it extra bright. And this is the night sky in September of 3 BC, and it's about 60 miles south of Baghdad in Iraq. So the Magi came from Babylon, or this certain school of the Magi came from Babylon, which is now modern-day Iraq. So Jupiter is called the king planet because it's the largest planet in our solar system, or the king star, I guess. Well, the king planet. And Regulus is the king star because Regulus, we get our word regal. The Greek name for it means king. The Roman name for it means king. I forgot what they were. But yeah, so we got the king planet and the king star getting really close to each other. If we continue reading in verse 3, it says, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and the teachers of religious law and asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? The reason why that's important is because Herod didn't know about it. So that rules out some other things that the star, could have been but wasn't. So like a comet. Some people, it can't be a comet because comets were like omens of doom. And comets are recorded in history books. Like the Chinese record the records. And it couldn't be a nova, like an exploding star, because same thing. The Chinese would record that. So it rules out some things because he had to be taught like, oh, this is what it was. And it wasn't like, super well known. If we keep reading in Matthew, here's in verse 5, it says, in Bethlehem in Judea, they said, for this is what the prophet wrote, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. And this is why Herod wanted to kill the babies, because he didn't want competition and a king to rise up against him. In verse 7, then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too. But he probably had other intentions. Now the Magi, when the first, what I showed you earlier was, here, let me skip over to here. Okay, hang on. We got to read in verse 9 because it gives us another clue. After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. Now it talks about how the star went ahead of them. So now the wise men went to Jerusalem, talked to Herod, and then they were on their way to Bethlehem. Bethlehem is due south, and the star stopped ahead of them. So it had to be in the southern sky, and it says the star stopped. How can a star stop? You got to look at that. So this is Jupiter again, and there's a red line showing you its movement. It actually went down, changed direction, went back up. So it passed Regulus 3 times. The reason why it looked like it was looping is because it's called retrograde motion. Like we are on a moving platform. So the earth is moving. So kind of like when you're driving in a car on the highway. And if you pass another car, the car looks like it's going backwards. But it's not, right? It's just going slower than you are.
Right.
So that's kind of what is happening with Jupiter and viewing from the Earth. So so you got the king planet, the king star, and it's passing the Earth. If you wanted to stretch it, you could say it made a halo around Regulus. But it passed 3 times. That's significant. But maybe the Magi saw it like 2 or 3 times in their lifetime in the past. It wasn't enough for them to like make the trip, but like, hey, this is significant. And then one of the clues was the nation of Israel. Here's the constellations turned on. What animal figure represents the nation of Israel? The lion, like the Lion of Judah. So here's Leo, the lion, and here's Jupiter going and crowning Regulus in the constellation Leo.
Is that the moon, like, past?
No, I think that, it could have been. Yeah, it could have been the moon, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I thought it was a computer thing. Yeah, you're probably right. Now something happened during the daytime on this same day. So you're looking at September of 3 BC. In Revelation 12, it says, "A great sign appeared in the heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth." Okay, so who's the woman, do you think it's talking about?
Mary, maybe?
Giving birth to a son? Mary? Yeah. Mary, the Virgin Mary. And that same day, during the daytime, this is what was seen in the sky. So the constellation Virgo, the Virgin, has the sun, clothed in the sun, and at the foot there's a moon. It's really faint because it's just barely in crescent because it was a new moon and it marked the Jewish New Year, which happens in September. The new moon is it's actually a holiday, Rosh Hashanah, and it was a new moon, meaning a new life, new king, and at the foot of the Virgin. But if you fast forward 9 months, so they think that was conception, or when the angel appeared to Mary. So if you fast forward 9 months in June 17th of 2 BC, these two bodies get super close to each other. One of them is Jupiter again, king planet. The other one is the brightest body in the sky besides the moon. Who knows what in the night sky? Who knows what that is? You might know. I don't know. You seem like you're following me.
I say part of it is, it just depends. I'm gonna say my gut says the North Star, but
It's Venus. It's also another planet. So Venus and Venus, mother planet, Jupiter, king planet, get really close to each other, and it sounds kind of pregnant, right? And then, so this baby Jesus was born, and this was enough for the Magi. Like, okay, let's pack our bags. Let's start heading over to Jerusalem. The other thing to mention here is the two bodies don't overlap. This is really zoomed in, so a naked eye would view it as one star, but it'd be the brightest star that they've ever seen at that time. Now, here's the part about a star stopping over Jerusalem. Like, how could that happen? So again, here's the retrograde motion thing that happened. And Jupiter is here shown in the southern sky, and it reverses course. But this slide shows, or this video shows the dates. He throws out these dates. Now, when you're seeing Jupiter do this is happening over like days or weeks. So here's some dates that are spitting out. December 25th, it stops over Bethlehem and then continues on. So December 25th, what day was that? That was a day that Jupiter reversed course over the town of Bethlehem. I don't know if the Magi made it by that time, but it could have been when they presented gifts. That could have been very well the first Christmas. Now we're going to transition into the cross of Christ. So we're going to look at Peter. Also in his sermon talks about wonders shown in the heavens. So in Acts 2:19, he says, "I will show wonders in the heavens above and the signs on the earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and glorious day of the Lord. And everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So Peter is quoting the prophet Joel, and he talks about the day of the cross. He's telling the people there that, hey, you've seen these signs in the heavens on that day when Christ died. So you probably recall there were 3 hours of darkness when Jesus was hanging on the cross. It talks about the sun being turned to darkness and the moon to blood. Who can take a guess at what that means? The moon to blood. Yeah, a lunar eclipse. Exactly. Yep, a blood moon. So here's what a picture of a moon in eclipse looks like. So it looks like kind of a red, shadow. So the question is, was there a blood moon on the day of the cross? Well, we have to know what day to look at. So here's some indicators of what day Jesus died on the cross. It had to be a Friday, because Luke 23:54 talks about being preparation day, the day before the Sabbath. It had to be just before the Passover feast, John 13:1. It had to be the 14th day of the first month, which is the month of Nisan, which is either in March or April on the lunar calendar. And that's a commandment in Leviticus 23. Pilate had to be in rule, or reigning, and it's recorded that he reigned from 26 AD to 36 AD. And it had to be at least 33 years after the birth of Jesus. So like 31 AD or after, because he started his ministry around age 30, and then 3 years later, he died. So the only day that fits all these criteria is April 3rd of 33 AD. And that's the date that most people agree that Jesus died on the cross. So was there a blood moon on that day? And let's look at this. So there's actually the constellation Virgo. You can't really, shows it to you better. So this was that same night that Jesus died. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the moon went into eclipse, but you couldn't see it because it was still daytime. But that night, this is what you saw. Here's the constellation Virgo again, the moon at her foot. But now it's a full moon. It's not a new moon anymore. So now it's, Jesus, I get emotional. Jesus living a full life. And the moon is in eclipse.
Wow.
So, in summary, we kind of recap. God made a planet that supports complex life. These same factors allow for scientific discovery. Kepler's law make the universe like a giant clock. It's very precise. It's very predictable. When God spoke the universe into existence, he set a clock into motion. He had pre-planned the day that the angel would appear to Mary and conceive Jesus. He pre-planned the day that Jesus would be born in a manger and the day that he would die on the cross as a sacrificial Passover lamb for us. So we got to ask ourselves, why did God do all this? Did he, like some of my thoughts were, did he want to be worshipped by us? Did he not feel worshipped by the angels? I don't know. Were they not doing a good job? I don't know. But, what's different than, what's different with us and the angels? Well, I thought, we haven't seen God. Maybe he wanted to see if people would love and worship him and have faith in him without physically seeing him. I don't know. But we've got to ask ourselves, why would God do all of this universe for us? It's just mind-blowing. So as we take communion, I'm going to play some music here, but reflect on that and reflect on God's power and love for you. Okay, I'll say a prayer here. Father, thank you so much for allowing your son Jesus to die on a cross for us, and the amazing poem that you wrote, creating the universe and all of its majesty and glory. Father, we pray that we can honor you and worship you in our hearts, in our life, and be with us as we commune with you. In Jesus' name, amen.